Our parents are dead. We are hungry, the small voices cried. Military Officer Vivian stopped walking. She turned and saw 5 homeless children sitting by the roadside. Their clothes were torn, their faces dirty, and their eyes filled with sadness. Without hesitation, she opened her army bag and took out her breakfast. It was only bread and tea, but she divided it into small pieces and handed it to them. "Eat," she said softly. "Eat and be happy. Your happiness is mine." The children ate quickly, crumbs falling from their hands. For the first time that day, they smiled. Vivian stood there quietly, watching them. Her heart felt something it had not felt in a long time: joy. That night, back in the barracks, Vivian could not stop thinking about them. Around her, the other military officers were laughing, sharing stories about their families, their wives, and children waiting at home. Vivian sat in silence, staring at the sky. She thought about her own life. She had tried to find love, but no man stayed. She had tried to have a baby, but it never happened. Her heart felt heavy. But as she sat there, she whispered to herself, "If I cannot have children of my own, then I will love the ones who have no one. I will become their mother." The next day, she returned to the same street. This time, she carried a large pot of spaghetti with red stew. When the children saw her, they ran to her with joy. She knelt down, served the food, and said again, "Eat and be happy." From that day on, it became her mission. Every evening, after finishing her duties as a military officer, she came to feed them. They stopped fearing her uniform and started waiting for her. They began to call her Mama Soldier. Weeks later, Vivian decided to do more than feed them. She wanted to give them a future. One morning, she went to the market and bought new school uniforms, socks, shoes, and small school bags. The next day, she arrived where they usually gathered. The children's eyes widened when they saw what she carried. She placed the uniforms on the ground and said with a smile, "From today, you are no longer just children on the street. You are students. Dress up and go to school. I will pay for everything. The world may have forgotten you, but I never will." The children cried and hugged her tightly. That day, Vivian walked them to the nearest school herself. At the gate, she explained everything to the head teacher, filled out their forms, and paid their school fees. She also bought their books, so they would never feel less than other children. The next morning, she walked them to school again, proudly watching them wear their new uniforms. They smiled at her before entering the classroom. Her heart was full. Every day, she walked them to school before going to the barracks. After her duties, she came to see them and ask about their lessons. Slowly, they began to change. Their faces looked brighter, and they started to dream about their future. One faithful evening, Vivian decided to bring the children to the barracks. She wanted them to see where she lived and to meet the other soldiers. When she walked in with the 5 children following her, the other officers looked surprised. Some laughed, joking about her being a mother hen. But Vivian didn't care. She stood tall and introduced each child proudly to her colleagues. "These are my children," she said with a smile. "They may not be mine by blood, but they are mine by heart." The soldiers chuckled, some shaking their heads, but Vivian felt no shame. She felt happy, happier than she had ever been. After the introductions, she sat the children down in a quiet corner of the barracks. Her voice was gentle when she asked, "Tell me, what happened to your parents?" The children looked at each other with confusion. They were too small to remember the details. Finally, one of them spoke softly. "We don't know. We were little when they died. But we remember our uncle. He threw us out months after they passed away. Vivian's heart ached. She reached out and hugged them all at once. In that moment, she knew she would never let them suffer again. That night, as she sat alone in her room, she felt a sense of purpose so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Military Officer Vivian had no child of her own, but she was now a mother to the homeless. One fateful morning, just as the sun rose over the barracks, Military Officer Vivian received an urgent call. Her commanding officer ordered her to prepare for immediate deployment to another state. The mission was classified, and she had no time to waste. Vivian's heart sank. She had no chance to visit the children, no time to explain why she would not come for them that day. As she packed her bag quickly, tears welled in her eyes. "What will happen to my children?" she whispered to herself, sitting on the edge of her bed in the barracks. Her hands trembled. She had fed them, clothed them, and given them hope. Now she was leaving without a word. At school, the children were waiting. They stood by the gate as they always did, their little eyes searching the road for her familiar figure. Hours passed, but she didn't come. The teachers eventually sent them back to the empty place they called home, but they refused to sleep. "Mama Soldier will come," they told each other, holding on to hope. They waited until night fell, shivering in the cold. Still, she did not return. Meanwhile, Vivian sat in a military truck with other officers, her heart heavy. The sound of the engine was loud, but the only sound in her mind was the voice of the children calling her. She stared out the window, her thoughts drowning in guilt. "I should have told them. I should have left food, something, anything," she thought. But duty called, and in the army, orders were not to be questioned. The truck moved farther and farther from the city, taking her away from the little ones who depended on her. That night, at the new base, she could not sleep. The other soldiers laughed around a campfire, but she sat alone, hugging her knees. Her mind wandered to the children. Were they hungry? Were they scared? Did they think she abandoned them? "God, please protect them until I return," she prayed, tears sliding down her cheeks. Back in the city, the children returned to the streets. They had food for only one day, leftovers from what Vivian last cooked for them. By the second night, they had nothing. They huddled together under an old wooden shed, crying quietly. "She promised she would never leave us," one of them sobbed. But deep inside, they still believed she would come back. They knew their mama soldier would never forget them. Vivian's deployment lasted longer than she expected. Days turned into weeks. She fought hard, serving her country, but her heart was always with the 5 children she left behind. Every night before sleeping, she looked at their picture on her phone and whispered, "Hold on for me, my babies. Mama will come back." Far away, the children's hope began to fade. They begged for food on the streets, wearing the same school uniforms Vivian had bought for them. Every day they asked strangers, "Have you seen our mama soldier?" No one had answers, but they never stopped waiting. Weeks passed before the mission finally ended. Vivian's heart raced as she boarded the military truck back to the city. She had served her country, but every mile closer to home, her thoughts were only of the 5 children she had left behind. The moment she arrived at the barracks, she didn't even rest. Still in her dusty uniform, she rushed to the school. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the head teacher. "Where are my children?" she asked, breathless. The head teacher gave her a sad look. "Officer, they haven't come to school for months. We thought maybe you withdrew them." Vivian's heart dropped to the floor. She didn't speak another word. She turned around and walked out, her boots heavy, her chest burning with guilt. She went straight to the streets. For 9 days, she searched every corner where they once played, every alley where they once slept. She asked street vendors, beggars, and strangers, "Have you seen 5 children? They call me Mama Soldier," she begged. But no one had answers. Every night she returned to the barracks exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying. The children were nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, far away, the children had moved on with their homeless life. They had learned to beg in a distant part of the city where no one knew them. Their uniforms were torn, their shoes worn out, and their faces carried the pain of abandonment. They had lost hope of seeing Vivian again. On the 10th day, just as the sun was setting, Vivian walked down a narrow, dusty street. Her boots were muddy, her eyes filled with despair. She was ready to give up, until she heard familiar voices. She stopped, listening closely. There they were, 5 little figures sitting at a corner, hands stretched out, begging for food. Vivian's heart leaped. She ran toward them, tears blurring her vision. With a voice trembling and full of emotion, she shouted, "Children!" The kids froze. Slowly, they turned around at the sound of her voice. When their eyes met hers, time stood still. Vivian fell to her knees right there on the dusty street. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she cried out, "Forgive me! Please forgive me for leaving without telling you. I didn't mean to hurt you. I should have told you. I'm so sorry, my babies." The children stared at her for a moment, their eyes wide with shock. Then, one by one, they ran to her, wrapping their tiny arms around her neck. They cried together, their tears mixing with the dust of the street. Vivian held them close, promising, "I will never leave you again. Not ever." That night, for the first time in months, the children felt safe. Their Mama Soldier had come back. That night, after finding the children, Vivian didn't take them back to the street. She carried the smallest one on her back and held the hands of the others as they walked together to the barracks. The other soldiers watched in silence when she arrived with the 5 children. No one laughed this time. They saw the tears in her eyes, and they knew this was no ordinary soldier. This was a mother's heart in uniform. She cleaned them up herself, scrubbing away the dirt that months of homelessness had left on their small bodies. She warmed water, gave them clean clothes, and served them a hot meal. The children ate slowly, staring at her as if making sure she was really there. After they finished, they clung to her legs, refusing to let go. That night, she spread blankets on the floor of her small room and made them a bed. She knelt beside them, her hands shaking slightly as she prayed aloud. "God, thank you for bringing them back to me. Protect them, keep them safe, and give me the strength to always care for them." The children listened quietly, and for the first time in a long time, they slept peacefully. Vivian stayed awake for hours, watching them breathe, feeling a joy so deep it brought tears to her eyes. The next morning, Vivian wasted no time. She knew the old school had given up on them, so she took them to another school across town where no one knew their past. She bought them new uniforms, shoes, and books again. She knelt in front of them at the school gate and said softly, "This is a new beginning for you. Study hard, stay strong, and remember, I will always be here for you." The children nodded, holding her hands tightly before walking into class. From that day, life slowly became better. Vivian balanced her duties as a military officer and as their protector. Every evening, after long hours of service, she came back to the barracks and made sure they ate, bathed, and prepared their homework. On weekends, she took them to the park, telling them stories of bravery, hope, and love. At night, she tucked them into bed and whispered the same words over and over again, words that healed their broken hearts. "I will never leave you again. You are my children, and I am your Mama Soldier. I promise you every night that I will always be here for you." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The children began to smile again, not the small smiles of survival, but the big smiles of kids who felt loved. They began to dream out loud. One wanted to be a doctor, another a pilot, another a teacher. Vivian listened to every dream, promising to support them until the very end. Her fellow officers, who once laughed at her, began to respect her deeply. They saw the sacrifices she made, the love she gave, and the way she carried both her military duties and motherhood with pride. One evening, as the sun set, Vivian sat outside the barracks watching the children play. Her heart was full. She knew her life had changed forever. She had no child of her own, but she was now a mother to the homeless, stronger, happier, and more fulfilled than ever before. For the first time in years, Vivian whispered to herself with a smile, This is the life I was meant to live." And every night, before she slept, she prayed the same prayer. "God, as long as I have breath, I will protect them. These are my children. My love for them will never end." Years rolled by like pages in a book. What once began as a story of hunger and tears slowly turned into a story of hope, success, and dreams fulfilled. Under the care of military officer Vivian, the 5 children blossomed. With her guidance, they grew stronger, healthier, and braver. Every morning, they went to school with pride, no longer hiding their past. Every evening, they returned to the barracks, where their mama soldier waited with open arms, a warm meal, and words of encouragement. Their teachers were amazed at how brilliant they were. Each child worked hard, not because they had to, but because they wanted to make Vivian proud. They knew where they had come from, and they carried that memory like a torch, lighting their path forward. Year after year, they excelled. They won awards, topped their classes, and earned respect everywhere they went. By the time they completed secondary school, they were among the best students in the city. Vivian was there for every moment. She clapped the loudest at every graduation, cheered the hardest at every prize-giving day, and cried the most at every milestone they achieved. After high school, they all earned scholarships to attend universities. The day they left for their different campuses, Vivian hugged each one tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Go and make the world see what children of the street can become," she told them. "Go and shine, my babies. And never forget where you came from, or who loves you." They promised her they would return. And so, they went. The years in university were not easy, but the foundation Vivian gave them kept them strong. They studied hard, never forgetting the woman who had saved them from the street. They wrote letters, called her when they could, and sent pictures of their progress. Vivian's heart swelled with pride every time she saw them achieving their dreams. Finally, one by one, they graduated, each with honors. They were no longer the small, hungry kids she had found crying by the roadside. They had become men and women ready to take on the world. After university, life called them to different places. Some traveled abroad in search of greener pastures, while others found work in different cities. They were growing, building their lives, and reaching heights they once thought impossible. Vivian watched them go with mixed emotions, pride in their success, and sadness in her heart as her home became quiet again. The barracks that was once filled with their laughter now echoed only her footsteps. Watch out for part 2. Their return will shock the world. The story is far from over. What happens when these 5 children, once homeless, now successful, come back to honor the woman who saved their lives? Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the continuation of this story.